Former New York prosecutor and civil rights attorney weighs in on controversial deportation case. Former New York prosecutor and civil rights attorney Charles Coleman Jr. breaks down the legal battle surrounding a recent deportation case. He compares the Trump administration's argument to a scenario where a parent bans TV after 10 p.m., but a child caught playing video games at 10:05 claims the rule never specifically mentioned video games. In legal terms, the administration attempted to justify deportations by relying on an outdated 1798 law, rarely used outside wartime, to circumvent due process. A federal judge ordered the deportation flights to be halted, but the administration argued that the planes were already in international airspace when the ruling was issued. The key issue here is that a judge's order, whether given verbally from the bench or in writing, must be followed. Instead of contesting the ruling outright, the administration is attempting to shift the narrative by labeling the deported individuals as criminals to justify their actions in the court of public opinion. Are the deported individuals actually criminals? There is no verified evidence that those deported were gang members, despite the administration's claims. Their identities remain anonymous, highlighting the core issue: the lack of legal hearings to determine their status. The judge emphasized that due process must be upheld and that the government cannot invoke an obscure wartime law to bypass legal procedures. Without proper hearings, there is no way to verify whether the individuals were truly criminals or not. Ignoring judicial authority and the political strategy at play, the controversy extends beyond the deportations themselves. The Trump administration's response to the judge's ruling has raised alarms about the erosion of judicial authority. Susan, a legal analyst, notes that the administration's blatant disregard for legal norms has not sparked as much public outcry as one might expect, suggesting a troubling normalization of such behavior. Furthermore, senior officials have launched direct attacks on the legitimacy of the judiciary, framing judges as obstacles to their agenda. A tweet from Stephen Miller, a senior White House official, criticized judges for undermining executive power, reinforcing the administration's narrative that judicial oversight is an impediment to governance. Analysts suggest that this confrontation may be a deliberate political strategy, leveraging a strong stance on immigration to rally support, despite the legal and constitutional concerns. A slippery slope for governmental checks and balances. While many Americans support the deportation of criminals, the broader issue at stake is the potential breakdown of the balance of power among the three branches of government. Charles Coleman Jr. warns that disregarding judicial authority sets a dangerous precedent. If a president can ignore court orders without consequences, it raises questions about the long-term legitimacy of the judicial system. The Supreme Court's recent ruling on executive immunity further complicates the matter. If a sitting president's actions are deemed immune from prosecution, even in defiance of a court order, it could create a constitutional crisis. This case could serve as a test of the judiciary's ability to enforce its rulings against an administration willing to challenge the limits of its authority. Trump's challenge to presidential pardons. The conversation then shifted to another legal debate: Trump's claim that President Biden's pardons, signed using an autopen, should be invalidated. Coleman dismisses this argument entirely, stating there is no legal basis for it. If such a challenge were valid, it would call into question countless executive orders and policies that have been signed electronically over the years. This appears to be another political distraction rather than a legitimate legal argument. The influence of conservative think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, which has become closely aligned with the Trump administration, is reportedly behind this autopen controversy. Analysts note that the think tank has evolved from a policy organization into a direct extension of the administration's political operations. While it provides intellectual backing for many of the administration's initiatives, critics argue that its growing influence raises concerns about the politicization of legal and governmental institutions. Trump and Putin. The implications of their upcoming call in international affairs. President Trump is set to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin, sparking concerns over potential concessions. Recent reports suggest that Trump may be willing to recognize Russia's territorial claims in Ukraine in exchange for a ceasefire. This aligns with his pattern of avoiding criticism of Russia while taking a more confrontational stance toward Ukraine and U.S. allies. Last week, Ukrainian and Trump administration officials discussed a potential 30-day ceasefire, which Putin subsequently rejected in favor of broader demands. Observers fear that Trump's willingness to negotiate in Putin's favor could have long-term consequences for U.S. foreign policy and global stability. As these legal and political battles unfold, the implications extend beyond individual policies, touching on the very foundations of democratic governance, the rule of law, and America's role on the world stage.